ES Audio.
This is the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. I'm Nick Curtis.
I'm Nancy Durrant.
And I'm Nick Clark. This is what's coming up on the show. For our first review, it's I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical.
I dreamed a dream like every young girl had.
This is by Alexander S. Beaumonge, and it's on at the Wilton's Music Hall.
For our second review, we'll be discussing Candy at the Park Theatre. This is a play written by Tim Fraser and directed by Nico Rao Pimpare.
And for our interview this week, we join Miriam Battye and Katie Posner at Somerset House to talk about their new show, Strategic Love Play.
I think it's harder and harder for young people to feel really motivated to kind of make stuff, because what is there waiting for them?
Welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
So the main thing that caught my eye this week was a piece in The Stage by David Benedict talking about the reviews of Next to Normal.
That's the one we reviewed last week, isn't it?
Yep, which we said could have been subtitled Mental Illness the Musical. It's a Tony and Pulitzer Prize winner from Broadway. It's taken 14 years to get here. David Benedict is suggesting that some of the reviews, the more negative ones, have tended to concentrate on the moral choices that the main character makes with regard to her treatment, specifically whether she's going to give up her medication, whether she's going to have more electroconvulsive therapy, or whether she's going to sort of go cold turkey and tough it out and just see what her bipolar disorder, where it takes her.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting that this is the wrong way to go about approaching a show. If you are making judgment on the content rather than the manner of its expression, that you're somehow crossing the line as a critic.
I'm not unsympathetic to that point of view. I sort of feel like you have to be able to make art about anything, really, don't you? And you have to be able to show people making decisions that you don't necessarily agree with. Or at least explore the possibility that people might make those decisions. I mean, otherwise, what's the point? It's just not. It's
interesting. I've always felt happiest when I'm talking about aesthetics rather than morals, or ethics. I'm much happier in the role of critic, where I think it is your job to judge the aesthetics of a show and the effectiveness of its, of its writing and its.
You've got to. Is it successful in what it's setting out to do, rather than what you want it to do?
Yeah, there was a big spat one time between Charles Spencer, critic of the Telegraph, and David Hare when David Hare wrote, I think it's My Zinc Bed, where he basically says that the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program has become a cult almost. And Charlie, who'd been through the 12-step program, thought that this was an immoral position to take, and there was briefly a real spat about it. I just wanted to read out this quote that David Benedict cites in his piece from Edward Albee, the author of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. When a critic sets himself up as an arbiter of morality, a judge of the matter and not the manner of a work, he is no longer a critic, he is a censor. So I think that's pretty succinctly put. Interesting.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, well, it's fascinating to us because we do it, but, the job of a critic and like where you draw the line, I do think you have to be so, you have to remember that the people in these things are not real. Yeah. And I think you should always attempt to fall on the side of what is this trying to do rather than I hate that decision, it's wrong. Yeah. Like, sure, the decision might be wrong. Somebody might make a decision which is cruel or damaging or completely immoral or whatever within a play. That doesn't mean necessarily that the artwork itself is wrong. Almost never.
As long as you're licensing professional critics to go and give an opinion on something, they will be influenced with whether they like a play, whether they warm to it or not, won't it? I mean, you do try and be as professional and as fair as you possibly can and judge something on its merits, but some of the time you will just go and see something and think, I hate this.
Yeah, speaking of which.
Of which more later.
Anyway, there was one nice thing that happened this week, which is that theatre tickets for Spirited Away are about to become available, which will be incredibly exciting to a lot of people. I think there are about 125,000 people signed up for the ticket release day. Priority is September the 5th, everybody, but general release goes on sale from the 7th. But they are apparently, and you never know quite how many there are in this group, but there are apparently tickets as low as 30 quid. So I think,
it's at the Coliseum, isn't it? So there'll be plenty of tickets to shift.
That's true. Yeah, it's a big old space.
And 30 quid might not sound overly cheap, but this is obviously going to be something fairly spectacular and fairly, we shouldn't prejudge. We'll tell them whether it's spectacular or not in due course.
Thank you very much.
But I imagine there's going to be quite a lot of money spent on this.
Oh, yeah.
So, they'll be having to recoup somewhere, won't they?
Well, yeah, definitely. And you know what, the ENO, something I discovered recently that I shamefully did not know, the ENO actually gives away free tickets for its opera productions to young people. Like, I thought they were like 25 quid, and you can get 25 quid tickets, but there are also free tickets, like quite a lot of free tickets available for young people to their opera productions, which I think is very good.
I think that's very good.
Great that their base is still staying in London for
For
another
a while, at least,
For
yes.
a
Yes, yeah.
An unspecified bit.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway.
Well, should we get into our first review?
Well,
Yeah, let's do that.
Which is I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical at Wilton's Music Hall.
I wish that my life were like a musical, that I could go walk.
Tell me about it. I didn't see it. I actually, we had a Who's Seeing What this week, and I got a short straw on this one.
We tossed a coin. And
Yeah, exactly. You had a better evening than I did.
Straws, I think.
Anyway, go on. Tell me about it.
So, yes, I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical. It's by Alexander S. Beaumonge, directed and choreographed by Matthew Parker, and it's just arrived from the Gilded Balloon in Edinburgh. It's its third Edinburgh season. Load of 5-star reviews up there, and obviously very, very popular, brings its own fan base.
I also really appreciate the use of the subjunctive in the title.
I love the use of the
like that.
subjunctive in the title,
Really
yes.
like that. Made
For
me really happy.
grammar fans out there, that's if there's an element of wishing or possibility in the use of the past tense, then it should be were, not was. I used to be a
Thank you.
sub-editor.
Did you?
Yes, I
I can't
did.
tell. Go on, Nick. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, it's a sort of comedic musical review that basically sets it up as giving you everything you want to know about musical theatre, super fans, the people who love it, the audiences, the stars. It had great crits from Tim Rice, Miriam Margolyes, Ruthie Henshaw. They all loved it.
I'll bet.
Now, Nick, we spoke last week about a mirror in which you decried writers writing about writing. So how about musical performers singing about musicals?
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit musicaled out this week. So maybe I went to this with a slight sense of humour failure. But in some ways, it's a fairly short show. It's 70 minutes. There's about 16 songs that they pack into that. There's no song list, so we don't know what the titles of any of them are, and some of them sort of meld into one another. But there's approximately 16, so it's fairly song heavy. And
it's sung through.
It's sung through
pretty
effectively,
much.
and it's basically got sort of three things going on in it. There's a sort of arc of what you expect from a musical, so big opening number, some sort of romantic interlude, a big dance routine, and then a finale.
Surely there's a ballad. There's got to be a ballad.
There is a ballad, but I suppose
Yes.
they're just sort of hitting the major marks on the arc of a sort of story of a musical. Wedded into that is the arc of sort of performers, from auditioning through to becoming a star, and also the audience who are variously badly behaved, bored, or enthusiastic. I personally was a little bit bored. I am fed up with shows that tell you how tough it is to be a musical theatre performer, but also how wonderful. Laugh at us, but also love us. That's what the message of this show seems to me to be. I found it quite witty. It's quite clever. It's accompanied by Mr. Beaumonge on the piano on stage. He does quite a lot of what audiences of a certain age will remember Les Dawson doing, which is deliberately playing wrong notes and playing stuff out of tune, which is a phenomenally hard thing to do. I think it does work, and some of the singers do that as well. They sing songs out of key or out of register and out of time. I just felt it a bit thin, really, and a bit in-jokey, and I felt I'd seen it a million times before.
Well, I'm going to stand up for it a little bit here because, it's essentially a kind of jolly canter through the trials and tribulations of musical theatre fans and performers. Obviously, it talks about how hard it is because that's where the humour lies.
Yeah.
If it was very earnest and just talking about the greatness of musical theatre, I think we could all, pass the sick bags. But this is very much the drama student who's just come out of drama school and faces a sort of icy panel of auditioners who don't even look up and send us straight out. There's the Florence Foster Jenkins who can't sing, and I thought that was a very good moment, actually. The diva, or it goes through all of this stuff that the understudy sadly sitting in the wings. It's 70 minutes. It zips through. Clearly, it's a very Edinburgh. You see why it's perfect for Edinburgh.
Oh yeah, it's perfect for Edinburgh, and I can see why it got 5-star reviews up there. Mostly from bloggers, I think. Get me.
But also, it's sort of. It gives you the sense that it knows a lot about its subject, but it skates lightly over the top.
It does skate over the top. I think, as you say, it stood out in Edinburgh because it's very professionally done. The music is played well. The 4-strong cast are sort of I said mid-level troopers in the sort of trenches of musical theatre. You know, none of them are big West End stars, but they've all got good voices. They've all got, you know, enough nous to take the mickey out of themselves. They all know where to stand on stage. It's a slightly static show for a show that is about musicals. There's one dance number which is a bit sort of half-hearted.
Because they're slagging off dance numbers.
They're slagging off complicated dance numbers by doing a very, very basic dance number, which seems to be slightly bottling the opportunity, I suppose. The songs touch on different sort of genres within musical theatre, or sometimes evoke different themes. Songs you'll recognise from the big hits.
It does it very cleverly there, I think, because it'll lead you into what you think is going to be a cover of a West End song, but actually just knocks it into its own thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, you'll recognise songs from Les Mis and Wicked and all this, but it then uses it to its own ends and writes very funny little, you know.
It sounds very much like something that really, really knows its audience.
Yeah.
I mean, who's going to go and see I Wish My Life Were Like a Musical other than people who
wish
really,
their lives were.
really like musical theatre?
They do.
And they're going to really like. I mean, what was the rest of the audience?
They loved it.
It was there were quite a lot of older people with quite a lot of young kids there. So I think, you know,
Right.
there's you know, there probably is the family musical crowd there. There is a song about the super fans, which is quite funny, where all four of the performers come on as a different sort of super fan.
And reading your review, Nick, you outed yourself as knowing one of the most in-jokes ever, which I missed, I'm afraid.
There's a woman in that who says that she only ever uses as her password and pin 24601, which is Jean Valjean's prisoner number in Les Mis. I'm ashamed to know
I was
this.
sitting there scratching my head, but Nick,
To be fair, there is a song called 24601 in Les Mis, I believe. So, you know, it does, and one's seen the film as well as the stage production a couple of times, so it does lodge in your head. Yeah, I think you're right. It does know its audience.
And I think that's all right.
Yeah.
I think that's allowed.
It actually,
I don't
it's
begrudge them the ticket dollar that they're hopefully
I agree,
going
and
to get.
I wasn't bored. It took me a while to get into it, but actually, I thought it then finished rather abruptly. I was like, it's just suddenly ended, and I thought, oh, I could have had a few more numbers actually by the end.
It's
That's
worth
not
saying
common.
you should, even if you do wish your life were like a musical, you should be careful what you wish for, because as Jennifer Caldwell, who sings that song, in it remarks, if your life were like a musical, you could get trampled by buffalo, turned green, crucified, or sung at by Russell Crowe. So, you know, it's not all gravy on the musical train, I think. Yes,
And actually, she sings one of the best songs in it, which is "The Divas in the House," which
the Divas in the House,
love.
which with I thought a nice touch. She has a sort of Norma Desmond turban on,
Yes.
so you know, a bit of a
and a lot of
nod
gurning
forward.
facial expressions.
Yeah, nod forward to
and
Sunset
movement.
Boulevard coming back in. I just kept thinking back to, I remember seeing, they did Forbidden Broadway on at Jermyn Street Theatre about 20 years ago, when there was much less interplay between Broadway and London, so a lot of the jokes didn't work. But that seemed like sort of 20 times the show that this does. So so I just felt I've seen this done, you know, before and better. But maybe, as I say,
It's
I'm
not
just
that they poke fun at the critics at one stage, Nick.
Yeah.
Was
With that,
there is a very serious critic comes on and talks about her love of Beckett, but how secretly she just loves musicals and wants to. It's quite a fun song, because there's a football fan who does the same, and a heavy metal tattooist, and they all sing together.
It is
about
quite a
how
fun
much
song,
they
but
love
there's a
musicals.
slightly lame joke in there as well as saying, and I'm sure Shakespeare must have seen West Side Story, because that's why he wrote Romeo and Juliet.
right.
It's all right.
You're easily pleased, Mr. Clark. That's all I'm saying.
Listen, I had my glass of wine, I had my wine gums. It was great.
And let's face it, it's always a delight to go to Wilton's. It's just such an amazing venue, isn't it? You know, it's such a gorgeous space.
I'm so glad it survived, and I like the way they've left it still quite sort of tatty. It's really, really.
I think there's a term for it. They call it a state of managed decline, which is what I'm hoping for my retirement.
But is it what? There's a line about, isn't it, the longest or the oldest still running theatre?
I think it may well be. It's the
It is
last.
very old. It's the last of the old musicals,
It's the only
isn't it?
functioning musical, isn't it? Unless I can't think of another one that's still going. Don't know, but yeah.
London must be. Right?
Yeah, and I wondered, it was full last night. This show's in for a fairly short run, and I wondered if it was a local audience. Actually, last time I went there, I bumped into two people I know who live around the corner, who were there just having a drink to get away from their grandchildren. It has a very nice bar as well.
I think I might know who those people are. Anyway,
But yeah.
Anyhow, well,
Wilton.
it sounds like
You
a
should
lot of
go,
fun.
and
Well,
a lot of people will like this.
If you wish were like a musical, you will like I Wish Were Like a Musical. My Life Were Like a Musical. Lovers of this sort of thing will love this sort of thing.
Excellent.
Are you about to burst into song, Meg? Right, let's go for a quick ad break. And if you've not subscribed to this podcast yet, then this small break will be the perfect opportunity to do so.
Coming up afterwards, we're joined by Miriam Battye and Katie Posner for their new show, Strategic Love Play at Soho Theatre. We'll be back after these.
Hi, I'm Danny Mays, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. I'm at Somerset House with the writer Miriam Battye and director Katie Posner. Miriam was one of the youngest writers on the fourth series of Succession and has gone on to write on Dead Ringers, starring Rachel Weisz for Prime Video. She's written plays for the Royal Court, the new diorama, and her new one, Strategic Love Play, which was a sellout at the Edinburgh Fringe, is coming to the Soho Theatre from the 6th to the 23rd of September. Katie Posner is an award-winning theatre director and co-artistic director of the touring theatre company Payne's Plough and is directing the show. Miriam and Katie, welcome to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Hello.
Hi. Could you, between you, briefly describe the play?
It's one scene between a man and a woman who've met on their phones and they're meeting for the first time. And it is simply a play that is as brutal as the subject matter it is about, which is modern dating.
Yeah, and I guess how wild it is that we have these moments with people on the internet and then we sit across them in a pub drinking a pint or two, hoping to, engage in lifelongness together.
Lifelongness.
That's not even a word.
It's a great word, though. It covers the bases.
All of that nuss. I feel like that's what the play's about, is all of the nuss.
All of the nuss.
Yeah, I read the play the other day, and Miriam, I fear that your experience of dating has possibly been deeply traumatic.
Deeply traumatic. It's funny because if you ever ask anybody, I would say a huge percentage of people will say it has been deeply traumatic, which is quite funny because I think the idea is probably supposed to be that it's quite fun and or energizing and or enjoyable, but it is not. I have not found it to be that way. For some reason, it has not battered me down. I am probably the biggest romantic in the world, but you might not believe that, having read or worked on the play. Looking at me.
Oh, no, I think you are. What you just said, it seems fun, and it should be fun, right?
Yeah.
But it's exhausting, and
Yes.
I think that is actually what I love so much about the play is it's 70 minutes of real time with real people having big, knotty, mad, brilliant conversations and drinking pints throughout. And then, by the time we get to the end of the play, you've been on this date and you've kind of tracked through this whole, mad, brilliant conversation that they have and what could, essentially be their lifelongness of being together.
Yeah.
Lols.
What are the worst dates you've ever been on?
Old married lady, but
you've done it.
I went on a date. I once went on a date with a guy who said, "Would you like a drink?" And when I said yes, he said, "Oh, I've only got," I think I asked for like a Bacardi and Coke, because I thought it was really cool. And then he was like, "Oh, I've only got a £5 and that'll pay for my pint." And I was like, "Oh, okay then, just the Coke." And then we sat down, and after about 15 minutes, he said, "There's a well in the pub that I'd really like to show you." And I was like, "Yeah, you're okay, pal." And then he spent ages talking about like the construct of this well, and I was like, "What? Where am I? What is happening?" And the wildness of it is my mum had set me up with this dude, and so I was like furious that I was on a date with well man who wouldn't even buy me a frickin' drink. And then he was like at 9:30, he went, "Oh, so I best get you home." I'm like, "What era am I living in?" Anyway, it was a delight. We said goodbye, and then I was angry at my mum for a long time after that.
This is going to sound really corny. I've never had a bad date. I've only ever had.
Nice.
As in, I'm talking first dates,
right,
because
yeah.
I am like a. Well, that's not strictly true. So occasionally it's been a little bit difficult, but I've always had good dates because I've got like wild expectations and a huge fucking well, to use your word, of hope, like just lug about with me. So I always kind of sit down and I have been known to get quite invested and excited about things early on. So yeah, I would say I've had many dates, but they're always like in the moment can feel like they're spectacular, and then it always goes terribly wrong. It doesn't always go terribly wrong. I shouldn't say that. Sometimes it goes.
Katie, Payne's Plough, which is co-producing the show, is that right?
Yeah, with Belgrade and Soho and Landmark Theatre.
Excellent. It's still mercifully a national portfolio organisation for the Arts Council. And most of your work, Miriam's been staged and commissioned by subsidised British theatre companies. Mm-hmm. So I wondered if you could both talk a bit about that, like the importance of those opportunities for emerging writers.
You know, new writing and writers are what I've forged most of my career on. It blows my mind that we're at a point where new writing is so risky, and specifically outside of London, where it feels too scary to think of putting on a new play. Not for any London-centric agenda there, but just because we're questioning about what audiences want, and it feels frightening. And I just go, we need new stories. New stories tell us about who we are, and they shape and evolve, and they give us all this space and this curiosity, and it's amazing. And then, of course, at Payne's Pal, that is what we're about. We cherish and we nurture, and we love working with new writers. They sit at the heart of everything that we do, everything that we talk about, and everything we get excited about.
I always think, sometimes I go, oh, there's so many plays that are so excellent, like why am I writing this? Like, why am I writing this one? Why am I writing a new one? But I do think that we do need plays that have been written recently. I think you just need recent plays all the time, just like consistently all the time. I think, plays just need to come and be seen and then go and sort of be light on their feet. And I think that's why it has to be consistent commissioning, really. I mean, I've been so lucky. I mean, I've written. I mean, some people think that Scenes with Girls was like my first play, but it was probably my 18th play. But I wrote a huge amount of plays before that. But I was taking a lot of theatres in the regions, like particularly Manchester Royal Exchange and Bristol Vic and Theatre Royal Bath. They took a punt on me writing for their community projects, for the young people's theatre companies, and they let me. They gave me a small amount of money that was, well, not small to me then, that was very significant to me then, and gave me the opportunity to kind of cut my teeth and develop. But I'm really proud. I always feel like when I come to a new project, I have this like huge backlog of experience because basically quite a lot of people have taken a punt on me. So I always feel like I know how to write. I think I know how to write now. I think I am a playwright now after this decade. But that's only come because basically quite a lot of things I've written, someone has been waiting for them, and that's kind of motivated me quite a lot.
It's about access and exposure, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. There's been a sort of devaluing of arts subjects in the education system, let's say, for over the last, maybe even 10 years. What effect do you think that's going to have on the next generation, or what do you think it's having on the next generation of young talent that you're seeing coming up behind you?
It's an incredibly frightening thing to graft as hard as you have to if you want to write a play or if you want to make a piece of theatre. It's such a huge amount of work. It's a massive undertaking to look down the barrel of that gun and to not know that there's really anyone out there who's going to receive it or who's going to be interested in reading it or have the time, really, or the kind of manpower to be able to read it. I think it's harder and harder for young people to feel really motivated to kind of make stuff because what is there waiting for them? What's the promise? Yeah. And I think that's just really tough. And to be honest, even it's not all about, having a career in the arts. Sometimes it's just about like the joy and the kind of huge amount of personal learning that comes from doing drama when you're young. And I know, like, I got a huge amount out of it that wasn't just about me kind of planning for the future. It was genuinely my kind of personality was born as I started to go to youth theatre and stuff, and also did it in education as well.
I know there's some great theatres that really do have those, connections with their local young people and communities, and they find those ways to bring them in. But it does feel it's just getting, smaller and smaller, and it's so squeezed. I was thinking about a writer, though, and I was thinking, well, all of us as artists, we learn from each experience, don't we? So every time we put on a play, we learn because it's in front of an audience, or we learn something. I know I learn all the time as a director. I'm like, okay, cool. And you get that opportunity to get better. And I find it wild that in the arts, it's really hard because there isn't, like, in what other industry, like, Do you go and you don't fly the plane until you've like had that experience, or you've got that knowledge, or you've had that opportunity to keep testing and keep learning? And I think at the moment we're at such a point where there is no space for what is, failure. And I say that in inverted commas because I don't know what failure is, because actually all stories are impactful. But it feels so hard because it feels like there is just that pressure to be like, go do your thing and be amazing, and have opportunity. And we know how hard that is, and it's impossible. And it comes to money. It just comes down to money.
I know, but it's like, but that's the thing. Like, if you enable like young people whilst they're at school to make and to fail, or to try. I mean, fail, and it's a strong word, but like to make, to try, to cut their teeth, to work some stuff out, work out what they are and what they want to say, and how it feels to make stuff, and how it feels to put yourself out there like that. That's like doing some of the works that I'm not saying like give a commission to a bunch of 16-year-olds. I'm not saying that. It's like a cost-saving strategy in the long run if we want to have like good art and kind of glorious, seminal stuff coming out of the UK. It needs to be available to young people in schools and stuff, and also youth theatres as well. But
more art in schools.
I mean, it's absolutely undeniably the reason I am okay as a person. Is because of it. There's absolutely no question.
Art in school, definitely. Miriam and Katie, thank you so much for being on the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Thank you so much.
Strategic Love Play is coming to the Soho Theatre from the 6th to the 23rd of September. So go.
Yes.
Please.
See you there with a pint.
And a date.
A date, maybe.
That was Miriam Battye and Katie Posner speaking to me at Somerset House. After the break, we will review Candy at the Park Theatre. See you in just a sec.
Hi, I'm Matthew Modine, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Next up, Candy at the Park Theatre.
This is the one that I did not see. So, Nick, read your review.
Yep.
It looks like I might have dodged a bullet here.
I think you did dodge a bullet. Yeah, I think you gave that one a well-advised body swerve, really. This is in Park 90, the smaller space at Park Theatre. It does what it says on the tin.
This is the one in Finsbury Park, by the way.
It's in Finsbury Park, which unfortunately my guest for the evening didn't realise. I said, do you want to come to the Park Theatre? And he turned up at Regent's Park, which we discovered 20 minutes before.
Probably had a very nice time.
He had a nice walk through the Rose Garden, I think, and went out for dinner. So,
and a rather better evening than you did.
I think, and indeed than you did, I believe, Nancy, but we will get to that. So yes, this is a one-man show written by Tim Fraser, performed by Michael Waller, who is also the producer of it, and it is about a fairly sort of blokey northern young man, heterosexual, sort of aggressively heterosexual, you might say, who falls for his best mate's drag queen persona.
Usually I think we'd review something higher profile than this, but it's the tail end of the summer and there's a bit of a dearth of shows.
Edinburgh was on,
Yeah, exactly. I don't much like, it's new writing. This is a first-time writer. But they've done, apparently, you said in your review, Nick, about several different versions of this play over the last 5 years. Yeah. And frankly, if this is the pinnacle, then I'm sorry. I don't like, I really don't. I don't love tearing apart new work.
As I said in my piece, I blame Alan Bennett. In the same way that David Shrigley has convinced loads of people who can't draw that actually they're brilliant artists. Alan Bennett, basically the success of Talking Heads and the subtlety of Talking Heads, which gave apparently ordinary people, I know there's no such thing, but people with smallish lives, gave them dignity and drama. And it has convinced lots of people that it's very easy to do that in a monologue, and it just simply isn't. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the monologue form because I think drama exists on conflict and dialogue, and but when it's done well,
but it's storytelling. You know what I mean?
Yes,
it can be done so brilliantly.
It can be done brilliantly. So Alan Bennett, Peter Barnes, I was a great fan of his monologues that were done under lockdown on television. Conor McPherson started off writing monologues and only wrote The Weir to prove to people that he could do dialogue, which I always thought was hilarious, really. But equally, there's this whole sort of hinterland of fairly crappy Talking Heads, small t, small h, who've got nothing to say. And this is, I think, an absolute case in point.
I found the fact that I was sitting there in an audience watching this happening so embarrassing that I felt sick.
Yeah.
I hated this. The visceral mortification that this was happening in front of me was really, really upsetting. And that does not happen very often. I'm not exaggerating. It's 60 minutes of my life I will not get back.
It's true. It is slightly more embarrassing because the space is set up like a sort of pub function room.
Yeah.
So some of you are sat on seats, but there's a sort of stage on the ground level and sort of glittery curtains behind, and there are tables, pub tables, with individual tubes of Love Heart sweets.
I'm glad to say that, as you hoped, they had stopped doing that by the time I saw it. I only saw it last
because
night.
Lots of people the night I was there did start unwrapping their own candy when our character was talking about mentally unwrapping his version of candy, who is the drag queen who he's fallen for. We should explain a bit about it. I mean, or a bit about the problems with it. My main problem with this was that once you've got this revelation, it doesn't really go anywhere.
No.
So this ostensibly straight man falls for the female persona of somebody who he knows is his best mate, is the pasty lad he sat next to in school. And the next sort of 53 minutes are taken up with the fact that his mind just can't compute this, can't conflate the two.
I know, but it completely squanders it. It completely squanders the premise of him falling for his friend's drag persona in a way that makes it feel like a trick. Do you know what I mean? Like you've been lured there under false pretenses.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't explore sexuality or sexual fluidity in any meaningful way, or even at all, really, as far as and it's just a slightly titillating way to tell a slightly charmless story of a not very charming, emotionally stunted man.
I mean, there isn't really much of a story there. Once you get behind this sort of central premise, all it seems to be telling you is here is a man who doesn't understand his own emotions and who's quite lonely.
I mean, there's an attempt to give him a hinterland of some kind. But I don't know, if you're going to go and see it after this review, then good luck to you. But so sorry about the spoiler, but he has a sort of, he describes a suicidal moment, and it feels like it's been tacked on to make you sympathetic somehow, to sympathise with him, because the playwright realises he's coming across as the kind of bloke you might edge away from in a bar.
Yeah.
He's not someone you want to spend the next 53 minutes with.
Yes.
Really? He's not like super objectionable. He's just not really anything. But the line I wrote on my notes last night on the way home on the tube was, the main issue with it is that the writing is piss poor.
Yes.
It is really, every line is a cliche. Every comparison is weak. Every idea is hackneyed.
Yeah.
5 years of development, and this is what it's got to. It should have been read, given detailed feedback, and then the playwright should have been told to go away and write something else.
Yeah.
It's so flat. There isn't a great line in it.
No, and there is, I mean, Michael Waller, it seems like a relatively personable chap, and so, but there isn't a great deal of emotional variation in this, because he is just basically chatting with the audience all the time.
And the delivery is maddening.
Yeah, and occasionally
everything is
sort
said
of
like this, as if he's a total simpleton, up and down like that, and it just doesn't vary.
But also bids occasionally to sort of give him a bit more backstory and says, I'm smart enough to Google stuff,
Thank you, that's
spins out a
hilarious.
few facts like a pub bore, and you sort of think, well, that doesn't really work.
That is it. That is the word. He's like a pub bore. He thinks he's so much more clever and like witty than he actually is. Like that's how, not the character, just the play. It's not very good.
No, it's not very good. I feel honour bound to mention that in his programme biography, Michael Waller tells us that he is also a respiratory doctor specialising in cystic fibrosis, and never have I wanted more to say, don't give up your day job. Please, don't. But he's obviously, as I say, he's producer as well as performer of this. He seems to have been with it in all of its iterations. I'm mystified as to why.
I mean, I
don't know what
wanted
people
to
have
know.
seen in this story that makes them think, yes, let me go to all the time and expense and anguish. They were developing it through lockdown as well, I think, of putting on a play, which is not a simple
My question
thing.
about this is actually about the park. Does it have as part of its business model essentially renting out its spaces?
I don't
Because
know.
I can't think of any other reason why this has ended up on the stage, especially after 5 years of development.
I don't know the park's business model, but I think it doesn't get any subsidy. So I think in order to survive, it does. And I think the bit of London it's in and a certain amount of sort of celebrity support, I think it's sometimes got attracted good names to projects that go on there. So there's a slight sort of false sense of a coherent artistic policy and a sort of heart to the theatre. And I'm not entirely sure it is there.
There were some moments, when you're kind of like, oh no, I'm not enjoying this. Oh no, I'm still not enjoying it. And then you get to the point when you're like, okay, I wonder how long is left, I'm desperate. But you know, when you sort of get a bit slightly hysterical at those points. And there was a moment where Michael Waller is standing there, and he does lots of other voices as well. So he does his mum's voice, and he does Auntie What's Her Face. Actually,
and his annoying
mate. I'm not sure she ever speaks. But anyway, and his annoying, his really awful mate. And, you know, which is sort of mugging of the First Order in almost every case. But there's a moment where he describes Candy in her drag persona. That's the name of the drag persona. The friend is called Billy. Speaking, and he describes it as a sort of rich, smoky voice. And then he does it into the microphone. It's like, I'm Candy. I swear, I nearly lost it. It was the most sinister thing I've ever heard.
It sounds like from Scream.
It was
Hello,
so
Sydney.
sinister and alarming. And everybody there was just absolute deathly silence. So I just thought, I can't bear this. I don't understand why this is happening to me. It was so funny. It was just, he'd sort of like built it up as this like really sexy moment, and then it was just like being in a horror film. It was just
I wondered at one point. I wondered whether there was something deeper going on. You know, the fact, why have the two main male characters called Will and Billy? You know,
I know,
the same root from the same word. And I thought,
but it wasn't a thing.
Are they the same
Sorry,
person?
It made me laugh so much. I got mascara in my eye. Carry on.
If you think you're going to laugh that much at it, you're really.
You're really not.
There's a lot of hindsight at work.
I think this is a PTSD working as well.
Let it go. Let it go.
Oh my God. Anyway,
Laughter or
It's
just
sort of
hysteria.
yeah. I mean, it's sort of sad. This much thought has been expended on something that is really, really, really not worth it.
no, I really hope they weren't listening. Actually, it's just such a horrible thing to hear. That I want that writer to just kind of put this one aside. And, you know, obviously try again, always try again, because, you know, writing is all about trying again as much as it's like that's kind of like at least 60% of writing, I think. But this needs to be put to one side and never looked at again.
Yeah. So, Alan Bennett, if you're listening, I hope you're proud of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's it for the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
I think this week, yeah.
Check out all our other episodes below, which include interviews with the likes of Lenny Henry, Tim Minchin and Frankie Bridge, plus many more.
And you can find all our latest reviews at standard.co.uk. That's linked below.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast so you never miss us. Thanks to our producer, Rachel Abbott, and we'll see you next Sunday.